check, are we live? Apparently more people interested in vintage coding than on weekly IT news. Hey, welcome Christian. So let's see how this is going. My browser says one is watching. Would be great if we get more than one to start the show. Somehow I have the feeling this is not up to date when it shows one is watching and we have one in the chat. Okay, let's get started. Okay, maybe welcome everyone to today's live stream. I want to try something new and not only bore everyone with vintage coding. What I wanted to try is a new format here, or new and new. You might have seen similar concepts on YouTube, but does not mean we cannot do it or do it a little bit different. So my idea is actually to live stream a weekly IT show with the latest news, developments, IT software products, you name it. Let's just rearrange here some bits and pieces. And as with all my videos, we might continue to do this or we might not, depending how successful it is and stuff like this, and how many people subscribe, unsubscribe and give it a thumbs up. So bear with me also. Of course, we will in the future improve our studio setup, but right now I need to film in that corner of the office that I currently dedicated to YouTube content. So welcome everyone to today's Bits and IT news of the week. And although you might see here German text, this will not be in German and not all of these links will be German. So my concept is over the week I will make notes of newsworthy stuff and things like this, and then during the weekend make a live show with all of you and listen to your comments, questions and answers. So the most important and what we want to start with today is the In German here, Softwareschutz vor Spectre angegriffen ist weitgehend nutzlos. The software protection against Spectre attacks is for the most part worthless. And Spectre, of course, is a security vulnerability in many processors, like Intel, but also others are affected, disclosed over a year ago, January 2018. And what this allows is, this is using speculative execution and results from branch mispredictions to side channel attack here bits out of the CPU. For me, this was quite astonishing that this works at all. And initially my thinking was that this is not that important of a security vulnerability, because this usually requires that you can execute massive amounts of CPU cycles, so you already need to have some means of code execution on the server or system you want to attack. The only thing is later they have shown that apparently this also works in JavaScript engines with high performance just-in-time compilers. So apparently you could theoretically really write JavaScript code and hack people's browser and machine, theoretically, apparently. The only thing, of course, first of all, I think this relies on quite precise measurements, and I think many JavaScript just-in-time compiler engines and setups have already changed their runtime support stuff not to allow such precise timestamp measurements and things like this. But yeah, also as benchmarks has shown, of course, all the workarounds. So the protection for this is to flush much more context and avoid branch prediction on this security boundaries, and they of course come with a huge performance penalty. So in some benchmarks, even as measured by maybe even Phoronix and stuff like this, I think the benchmark performance hit was up to 50% or so in some database, whatever, something applications and stuff like this, everything that has a lot of context switches from kernel to user space to kernel space, and the other way around, and things like this. So yeah, now it turns out that new research has shown that all these mitigations are for the most part worthless and can still be work around it. Here's this scientific paper, and I have not even read it in full. I've only cross-read this. So if you're interested in security, server administration and stuff like this, you're probably interested to read this. Spectre is here to stay, an analysis of side channel and speculative execution. And yeah, just quite brand new here, February 15th. Just, what is it, 9 days old. And yeah, latest research on this matter, and obviously quite theoretically paper. So if you're interested in this kind of stuff, this is probably something you want to read and research. And yeah, so much to that. And again, just leave in the comments below if you have questions or answers or comments. We also have some less theoretical topics this week. Here's some also from similar news site. Apple new rumor and insider report is speculating Apple is planning to switch to ARM processors on their Macs starting from 2020. Apparently Intel is expecting this change and preparing for this. Apparently it was written here somewhere that apparently Apple is making 5% of Intel's revenue or something like this. So this is why this is coming out of Intel. Apparently they are preparing for a 5% or more plus minus hit in their revenue. This is how this somehow leaked from managers or analysts or something like this here from a report of Axios, whatever. Apparently from higher ranked Intel managers, according to this text here. I have no inside knowledge in this, but sounds plausible. What I wanted to say to this is, of course, this is already speculated for many years that Apple will eventually switch to ARM CPUs. And I find this move really stupid. In my opinion, this will hurt Apple's sales even now more. The professional scene, content creators and computer scientists, programmers and such already are not the greatest fans of Apple anymore. Also, maybe we should hide the advertisements there, because they should certainly pay us, not get free advertisements there. So, and this rumors are already going very long. And of course, in one way it makes sense that they have their relatively higher performance ARM CPUs, but mind you, these ARM CPUs in iPad are still not on a performance level of Intel Core i5 and i7. Of course, they are relatively good for what they do and what power they consume, but you should also not forget that Intel, AMD and others over the years had decades to improve the performance, and while getting 80% of the performance might have been possible for Apple, it is not easy to get the last 20% or even more, and certainly you consume a lot more energy reaching Intel's performance levels. So I'm not really sure if Apple will reach such a performance level, because obviously these Intel CPUs or Intel or AMD CPUs are quite some beasts, billions of transistors, and they are certainly there for something. I mean, all this executive speculative code execution with Spectre vulnerabilities come from something. And Intel is also not standing still, although they were standing still a little bit the last years, and AMD could catch up and overtake them in some areas quite a bit. I'm not seeing Apple there on this level. Also Intel, especially right now, being woken up and shaked up from AMD's Zen developments, and Intel for sure is doing everything they can right now to have bigger performance developments in the next years. And so Apple is developing here against a moving target, the industry leader, so to say. And yeah, also additionally, this affects users. Apple, of course, had already two transitions. Initially, they transitioned from Motorola 68K to PowerPC, and then from PowerPC to Intel. And this would be the transition from Intel to ARM. And of course, it is not impossible. And for the App Store apps that are mostly, in my opinion, 98% gimmicks, for those toy stuff, it's of course not a big problem to recompile, but for all the big software like Microsoft Office, Adobe Photoshop and such, it will be a bigger transition. And also the biggest impact actually will be that users cannot simply install Windows and Linux anymore. This will be, in my opinion, the biggest impact of this change. So I think Apple will lose even more customers. As you see, I and my friends and most professional users I speak to are right now already very much disappointed by Apple's development, and they will be even more when they realize they can't run Windows and Linux virtual machines anymore and stuff like this, or install it with this boot camp and stuff like this. But even for virtual machines, so of course you can run something like QEMU, but this is emulation, and this emulation is not very fast, as all of you who have run QEMU or PC emulator or Box or DOSBox and stuff, of course they are many times 10, 20, 50 times slower than virtualization, with all the just-in-time code generation and stuff, and invalidation with memory writes invalidating the just-in-time compiled binary executable results there in memory. So you can still run Windows and Linux on this ARM Macs in emulation, but this will be really slow and this will not be enjoyable. And I'm not really sure if this is a smart move. I see Apple wants to have more control and prevent people from installing other software. And even on iPhones and iPads, in my opinion, this is already today not very nice that you can't just take your Android or Windows and install it on it like you could do with a PC. And this is also why I say an iPad is not a computer. iPad is a limited logged in device where you can run only very tightly controlled software, and this will, in my opinion, not be the best development for Apple and the IT industry as a whole, because it just takes enormous amounts of flexibility and freedom away from users and developers. And as usual, just let me know in the comments below what you think about this and what is your opinion. Then maybe I rearrange this news a little bit, not to have two Apple news in a row. Next news, of course, AMD released Radeon 7, or however you want to pronounce this. This, of course, being the Vega 2nd generation, something I've been waiting for, and I can hopefully finally purchase a high-performance PCIe graphic card, because all the recurring viewers and subscribers know I don't have a great stock of latest and greatest GPUs here for test and tinkering. And I usually wait a little bit for a really nice price performance point. And this news is noteworthy for us and all our subscribers here, because Radeon, of course, AMD, of course, having state-of-the-art open source drivers in Mesa and the Linux kernel, and this, of course, means that we finally have even greater performance at our fingertips on pure open source systems with the Linux kernel and Mesa for OpenGL and Vulkan, and this is very much welcome. I can only applaud, recommend, and things like this, companies like AMD who are so open about their specification. As I said many times in my streams and videos, I do not agree with this secrecy that is NVIDIA is building up there about their GPU business. And as you can see here on the AMD Radeon side, they can operate quite fine with their register level specification in the open. And when we take a look on some benchmarks, these are not my benchmarks, you find them here on the Phoronix website that I also look up every other day and can in general recommend for open source news. And in the future we may run our own benchmarks as soon as we get here a little bit of a larger audience and purchase the latest and greatest. And you see that according to this benchmarks here, at least in many of them, this new Radeon 7 comes out quite at the high end, only sometimes surpassed by some of this NVIDIA binary only offerings, but in general, of course, this performance is quite amazing for entirely open source graphics. Really nice to see that we have such an high performance open source stack in the meantime, and with this register level specification in the open, of course, all the users, developers and such can contribute there, and there are also plenty of free hobby just at home for their private fun and education developers who contribute to this and find bugs and improvements. And this is exactly why usually this Radeon results keep improving. So this is not fixed in stone, but can still improve on a weekly and monthly basis, depending what open source people contribute to this. And this is also, I said it already and I will continue to say it again, this is also for other operating systems like BSD, Dragonfly BSD, Haiku and stuff like this, where you can write your own graphic drivers with this register level specification. And for example, if Haiku or Dragonfly BSD or any of other microkernel systems and whatnot, Plan 9 or Minix, you name it, if you have something as locked down and kept secret as NVIDIA, you do not have many chances to get their open source or in any other way isolated graphics running. And even on the Linux side, you see NVIDIA is boycotting this effort as much as they can by not releasing this firmware binaries. So back to the results here, pretty high end, only in some benchmarks, and of course this depends how far advanced this open source code is. Sometimes it is not as high as I would currently like to see it, but you see it is here touching the RTX 2080 Ti, still coming quite ahead. But again, this depends on the benchmarks. In some, I think, if I recall correctly, they were also at the highest end, at least at the top as well with the others. Yes, I personally wish they would have even higher performance, but you cannot always get everything you wish for. And again, this is, I think this was also open source code, so you should also not forget that this is completely open source code competing with NVIDIA's secret source, because they have the apparently best patents in the industry or something like this, whatever patent nonsense. But yeah, just going here over the results, you see quite high, not as well, realistically just a little bit behind, right? I mean, if you prefer open source, freedom and security, reviewability, you certainly get quite some performance. Yes, I agree, it would be even more awesome if they would be even more at the high end, but yeah, you can, if you want to get into driver development, get into this as well. And you see here, at least third place here, only behind 2080 Ti and Titan RTX. So yeah, you can review these results yourself. I for sure will get something like this, especially, I can't repeat it often enough, because this is more open, mostly open, and I hope completely open, but I've not looked at the specifications myself, but I will sure hope everything, or at least most register bits. And yeah, so in other news, Apple's car, sorry for the German headline, but you get the idea, I said it in English anyway, didn't have the time to find and look up pretty English sources for this, but more speculation about Apple's iCar business. They say it's speculated to be a transporter. I find this personally completely stupid, but what do I know? And why I find this stupid is because this is not Apple's core competence. I really wonder that they do it like this. I would prefer more that they focus on their IT computing stuff and not car business, and right now we have not seen anything of this. And also, if this is a transporter, I really wonder if they sell it to private persons. Maybe this is some non-private, only for commercial use, like hotels, airports, transportation stuff, business, you name it. No idea what they're trying to do, because if this is a transporter similar like this, I'm not really seeing all the private people who currently love their iPhone jumping on this bandwagon. I would more see people falling in love with their Tesla 3 and S and X and whatnot. They for sure are a little bit more modern and sporty and attractive than a transporter, whatever that should mean. And in general, I find it a little bit strange that Apple spending so much efforts on developing self-driving or electric car nonsense like this, because there are for sure already enough companies from Tesla and friends, not to mention all the established industry from Mercedes, BMW, Audi, Volkswagen and all the others, Volvo, Peugeot, Renault, you name it. And I would rather have preferred they would have built outstanding iPhones and not this feature deleted stuff they are currently trying to sell, and even I don't want to purchase without a headphone jack, and Macs that you can upgrade. And instead of, they could not get the Mac Pro to the market. You know, this trash can Mac Pro was delayed for over a year, and I really wonder what IT company is this who cannot even bring a trash can Mac Pro to the market that nobody wanted in anyway. And Mac Minis where the SSD is soldered in, that even if the SSD flash write cycles are exhausted in a couple of years or two, you can't even fix your logic board anymore because flash ships soldered to the logic board. And yet they spend so many efforts and resources to develop a car. I really have to say, maybe it would have been better for Apple to focus on professional Macs. And the sales are certainly not going down because nobody is looking for a professional Mac. Apple is simply not having one in their offerings, and this is for sure hurting their market percentage, sales and revenue and whatnot, and also customer loyalty, because as you see from my previous videos, even we had mostly Macs the last 10 years, also because we obviously, not only 15 years ago I liked the hardware quality, and then the last 10 years we had Mac software development and still have Mac software development, but even nobody from us wants a new Mac anymore for all the port, dongle, soldered SSD and stuff like this. And yeah, also in the Mac Pros, the SSD flash chips are soldered to the board, not to mention the memory anyway. But I find this really stupid that a company has such strange visions, or no visions at all anymore, that I would even rather see Apple develop 19-inch rack servers for data centers and stuff like this than a stupid car. Again, my opinion and market brand reception, but leave in the comments below what you think about this. And also I really wonder what Apple is using in their data centers. So I really wonder if they are running macOS Darwin on their data centers for iCloud and App Store stuff, or if they use Linux or FreeBSD. This would be really interesting. There once was a scandal where they apparently someone fake news found spy silicon chips on the motherboards, and Apple was asked to comment, and in this article stuff they mentioned, I think, Supermicro boards. And I really wonder if, although I might remember this wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, but this could mean that Apple is sourcing Supermicro boards for their data centers. And if this is true, I wonder if they order their Apple flavor server boards with the system management controller, which has this macOS secret keys, because macOS, when it's booting, it's checking secret keys in the hardware, in the SMC controller. There are two, like the temperature sensors that you see there at the side of the screen. All of those come from the SMC, and you see the Macs are thermal throttling and overheating as much that they need 30 temperature sensors. And among the sensors there are also two OS keys, not open source, operating system keys. And macOS has a don't steal macOS DSM kernel task module thing that is checking these two keys. Something like our hard work protected by the sport copyrights Apple computer. I cited this from the back of my brain. Might contain typos or might have been slightly similar, just that you have heard what kind of keys macOS is checking while it's booting. You find this also in the QEMU Apple SMC emulation module, just not the keys. The keys you need to extract from your Mac, OS key 0 and OS key 1. And yeah, I really wonder if Apple is ordering generic PC boards for their hardware and they run a flavor of macOS that is not checking these OS keys, or if they really order a special flavor, a special SKU from Supermicro, so with the Apple SMC controller with actually the OS keys. But in general, I wonder if they really run their data centers with macOS or with something more manageable like Linux or FreeBSD. But knowing Apple, it's probably rather FreeBSD than Linux. Anyway, so many more possibilities that Apple can do than this iCard transporter self-driving nonsense. And in general, I think many of the Silicon Valley companies would be better off if they would focus on their primary product group and not enter each niche or upcoming market, because as you see in the Apple case, so many resources spent for currently nothing. This project downsized, many often cancelled and people fired and whatnot. And the only outcome they have right now is that they do not have the most awesome Macs anymore, because I don't know if they just don't have the resources or not the vision anymore. Anyway, so much to the iCar. I think I said everything that I have to say about this. And in other news, let's jump here slightly over another topic. I hope all of you know about Turing completeness. Turing completeness, of course. Oh, wait a second. This is not the news. Somehow this did not. So Turing completeness is, of course, the theoretical definition of some machine that can do computations, like execute any kind of program, and we can look this up in a second. So this news is some years old. This is already from 2015, but I only recently discovered this and I found this interesting. This is why I included this in our first bits show here. So apparently the x86 move instruction alone is Turing complete, which is really crazy in my opinion. Let's look up Turing completeness for your education. Let's see, does it work this way? Where is this? Yeah, this worked. So Turing completeness, of course, you might know this from your computer science degree or hobby study, is a computability theory, a system of data manipulation rules, such as a computer instruction set, a programming language, or a cellular automation, is said to be Turing complete or computationally universal if it can be used to simulate a Turing machine. This means that a system is able to recognize or decide other data manipulation rule sets. This Turing completeness is used as a way to express the power of such data manipulation rule set. The expression power of these grammars is captured in the Chomsky hierarchy. Virtually all programming languages today are Turing complete. The concept is named after English mathematician and computer scientist Alan Turing. And probably all of you have heard about this already before, or more or less. Maybe you want, if it's the first time you hear about this, you might want to research this. And the news for me, and I have never thought about this, of course x86 is Turing complete, otherwise it could not execute all the fancy programs it can execute, obviously. But the news for me here is that just the move instruction alone is Turing complete, and this is extremely crazy in my opinion. So normally you would need load, store and stuff like this for Turing completeness. And by the way, one thing I knew, SED, the stream editor, the SED command line thing, is also Turing complete. And there were even people programming Tetris and Pac-Man or something in SED or GNU SED or something, which is also, but yeah, that SED is Turing complete with all the pattern matching and buffer swapping and stuff like this is still reasonable, understandable. That just the move instruction of x86 is so complex and universal that it is Turing complete is a shocker even to me. And yeah, now that I think about this and scroll over this paper, yes, and this is really interesting, but there you also see how complex CISC, complex instruction set architectures like x86 are, that you can already write a full Turing machine or create a full Turing complete machine with just the move instruction alone. So you have here load immediate, load index, load and quite many variations in this move instruction. And this people here, or Stephen Dolan, presented some years ago here a paper proving that just the move instruction alone is Turing complete. A really fun paper if you want to read something interesting this weekend, this Sunday with a coffee in the sun or something. This is a nice paper to read. And going back to the original Twitter post, I'm not sure where I found this, if I found this here via Twitter or something else, no idea. Just spotted this a week or two ago. And so Domas here, or XOR EAX here, has a GitHub repository where he has a Move-Fuscator or something, a program, yeah, Move-Fuscator, a program that is translating a post processor that translate C. This is even translating this into XOR instructions or something. By the way, was it? I think I saw, this is probably not what I meant. I think I saw here also, but he has so many interesting projects. Was it this? This is what I wanted to quote. This is a Move-Fuscator, and this compiles a program to move instructions, which is really crazy. So you don't even need to write this assembly instructions yourself and fiddle everything into move instructions, you can just throw this here into this program from XOR EAX, 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 and have this spit out just the move instructions. You see here, here's an example. So this is a original program that would hear from some hello world or something. And what this move viscator would do then would compile this to just moves. And then this looks like this. Can we also have this larger? Okay, the wonders of a little bit unsharp, but you see only move instructions in there. And you see the x86 move instructions are so versatile and complex, and that you can really write a program Turing complete in just x86 move instructions, just if you ever wondered how complex x86 is. And as a note on this, doing some protected mode programming with this DOS Vintage stuff recently, I figured, of course I did assembly programming not only 25 years or so ago, but also off and on with Spark and ARM and PowerPC and stuff. But of course I do not write PowerPC assembly each and every day. But with this PowerPC stuff, I recently, not PowerPC, with this protected mode stuff, I recently fiddled around a little bit more with x86 assembly, especially with this low-level stuff like jumping, loading global descriptor tables and jumping to protected mode selectors and stuff like this. And I realized that although this is so complex that you can have Turing completeness in just move instructions, yet this is so limited that you cannot move all registers to all other registers and things like this. And this is really, this x86 is so complex, yet you cannot just move each combination of registers around. That is really a little bit limiting often. So yeah, didn't find this very, don't remember precisely what, it was actually quite tricky to load there some segment registers, and yeah, with also x86 has very few registers, so not like RISC where you have 16 or 32 registers or something like this, with this handful of registers. Of course, AMD 64 expanded on this use of registers, so there you have, like, I think this was 16 or so, more or less general purpose registers, but classic x86 really limited in number of registers. And yeah, this was this. Then last but not least, Samsung released the Galaxy S10. Yes, super mainstream news. I guess you heard about this already. What I find noteworthy about this is that there were speculations that they might strip the headphone jack from this phone iteration. And I reviewed already the Samsung a year ago, a little bit, the S8, and I had the S9 Note shortly for the DeX docking station. You can watch these previous videos if you're interested in this. And I was honestly impressed by the Galaxy. I had Android phones, for example the Nexus 5, but I for the most part had iPhones the last years, and still running here the 6S because I want a headphone jack. And I'm really happy that they still have the headphone jack. This is I might personally get an S10, maybe, not the S10 Plus because I don't like such big phones, but I'm pretty happy that at least someone still sticks to the headphone jacks that I love so much for my vintage Sony headphones and stuff like this, quality stuff that just sound amazing, even for just maybe $200 or something. And yes, I know all the people who tell me, get over it, get a dongle, get a wireless. Ironically, I even have a wireless. I have the Sennheiser Momentum wireless. So I'm rich enough to have 3 headphones or something, maybe even 4. But my point is not that I cannot afford a new headphone, which I actually have, but I simply want to continue use my other headphones. Also, I have one headphone at home, one headphone in the office, one this Bowers and Wilkins C5 or something, small headphones in my traveling bag, and I simply do not want to get rid of all of them. And I have 3 or 4 good ones and I want to keep them. And I also do not want to run around with my wireless one, this Sennheiser Momentum that I usually have mostly at home, noise cancelling over-ear headphone. I made a review of this. You can watch this video as well. Pretty satisfied with this one, so it's not like I hate everything or dislike everything. Some things are also really amazing and good. but I also want to keep this another 10 years. And I also want to keep my Sony another 10 years. And you have seen my reel-to-reel videos, and which unfortunately is not my reel-to-reel, this Revox of my father's. But my point is, if you have various vintage gears like reel-to-reels, like vinyl players, and also just regular stereo, PlayStation 3, which although it doesn't have a headphone jack, but you get the idea, and stuff like this, or sometimes play retro stuff on your 486 like Monkey Islands or Manic Mansion, Formula 1 Grand Prix, and things like this, you name it, X-Wing versus TIE Fighters and stuff, you still have some headphone and want some headphone. And also some people sometimes lose a headphone, I usually not, but I know some people who on each of their holiday travel lose their $15 headset. And for those people it is also really annoying when they might lose wireless headsets even more, because they have less wire to stick to and less wire to hang on to. And yeah, my point is not that I can't afford a headphone, I just don't want another one. And I also don't want to travel with wireless ones, because usually my only wireless one at home that I charge once a month, usually when I want to use it, it's empty. And I simply don't find this wireless headsets the most comfortable and user-friendly, because you have to charge them so often, especially if you use them often. And I find this also in general really annoying. The rest of the phone, I've not seen it yet. This punch there through the OLED display, I'm not the greatest fan of notches, but whatever, I could not care less, so to say. Usually you have there something like the time or battery percentage, then it also doesn't matter if you have the punch hole there. There it's a side I might like it slightly more in general. This is also why I don't overspend for an Apple iPhone, because I simply don't like this notch nonsense there. And then at least the Galaxy S10 I can get on discount in already 2 months or so. And already very less that I overspend so much for this punch hole in the OLED display. Of course, with the OLED display and punch hole, state of the art, even smaller bezel there, and probably a little bit glass on the backside or something like this, usually, but I have to see it in person, just speculation, I didn't see all the reviews and such. But yeah, one of the phones I would rather get, especially in Germany, in Europe, you usually get some discount, which you usually don't get so much on Apple phones. On top of Apple is overcharging us European customers anyway. The directly translated price would be 999 euro, even including VAT, and they charge, Apple charges 1149 here in Germany, which is 149 euro over the exchange rate VAT conversion. And I simply do not want to pay so much for a phone that I can't even install my Linux on. And with this, you, at least in Germany or most parts of Europe, I would assume, pay less than this, especially after some discount in 2 months or 3. And then it's, for me at least, a pretty amazing phone, and probably one of the next choices for myself for the Android phone business. And maybe we do a review with this, also with the DeX stock. Maybe let's see if they still have this DeX. This DeX stuff was beta and written to be not usable after January. I've not yet checked if they really disabled the application. Where is, by the way, why did this not? There was a typo in the headline. Funny, did he correct this? Maybe he really corrected this. He had apparently a typo there. This is why he had source written S-O-U-R-E-C. So much to typos on Phoronix, apparently a recurring theme there. And questions from the audience we answer in a second. I want to close with AMD is hiring apparently 10 more people for the open source Linux driver team, and this is amazing. Or maybe I should slightly scroll over the advertisement there. Also there's an advertisement which we probably want to disable, not to give them free advertisements. And yeah, as I said earlier, Radeon 7. I can only applaud companies like AMD putting such an effort into open source work, and if this is true from, I only read the news like you read here, so I have no inside knowledge there. Not followed up on this, but apparently if this is true, this is amazing that they are hiring 10 people, and if you learn something from all the vintage retro graphic programming the last days or weeks here on my channel, maybe you have already enough basic knowledge to apply there for a job if you want a graphic driver programming job. And this is also why I always say we are an educational channel and do here all the low-level coding application. Yes, this was only hardware cursor and only BitBLT and line drawing and stuff like this, and aside a little bit PS3 RSX NVIDIA hacking, but you get the idea. All the 3D stuff is not that much different, just bus mastering all the commands into the ring buffer. So if you have some computer science degree or learned already enough graphic programming from my channel here, and we will continue with this maybe even later today, then you might have the chance to apply for a job there at AMD. 10 people they're looking for. Maybe I should end the stream now and write my application to AMD. No, just little joke. Of course, we're not doing this. We love our freedom, live streaming here some random nonsense each and every other day. So not applying to AMD right now. For this, I like my own company job here too much, having the freedom to do whatever I want each and every other day. But anyway, just a little side joke. And yeah, totally amazing year to come for graphics, open source graphics, Linux, BSD, you name it. Completely amazing in my opinion, much cooler than NVIDIA. And I can only repeat, yes, I sound like a broken vinyl, but I have to say this because there are too many NVIDIA fans out there, and I really don't like Linux users promoting NVIDIA because they have never been they have never done a good thing to Linux, and they never have been open, they never have been supportive, and things like this are only holding up the Linux desktop. Don't buy this, don't support this. Buy companies like AMD who pay developers, who open register level specification, and this is what is advancing the open source desktop, 3D, subsystem, you name it. And these were my pre-selected topics for today. 50 minutes, maybe, not too bad. And my dear is, this was only the first test, and as you have seen from my live stream this week, I was a little bit busy, not only with live streaming, but also with doing real paid commercial work in between and filling out text papers and such. So I will try the next weeks and months to come to always watch out for news during the week and compute a list here of stuff to talk about, and then hopefully during the weekend, always on a Saturday or Sunday when time fits, to live stream here some discussion. Would be amazing if we could gather some hundreds or thousands of people and have here a live discussion. And you can also comment what is your opinion. Would be really amazing to hear some dialogue and respond to your comments. Today we have not so many comments in the audience. Usually with our vintage checking we often have more. So today we only have good day and good morning. And good day and good morning to each and all of you. Thank you very much for joining here our first test bits show. And the other question from the audience from Vihang Dixit also is, what desktop window manager are you running right now? I don't recognize it. This is simply good old Blackbox that I mostly used for already over a decade or two. And while we have already 9 people in the audience, maybe we scroll here this news better to give better advertisement for AMD. And I initially, when I came to Linux 20 years ago, this were even things like what was this, FWVM or stuff like this, and then there was IceVM and so on, and then of course there was KDE and GNOME with whatever manager that was back in the day. This was in 1998, 2000 or something like this. And I used various stuff. I at one point also used KDE 3 as desktop. GNOME I never was the greatest fan of, although I sometimes used it a little bit with MetaCity or whatever were the window manager there. Also, approximately slightly over a decade ago, I was running this 3D compositor compits or something that is a little bit also forked, and there's no compits fusion or something. So yeah, I miss this 3D compositor a little bit, but I tried to update this in T2, but there is no some compits fusion stuff. I will probably eventually, what I don't like, because you might not see that much because it's on my second display, because some things are a little bit, you see here my task switcher here is only on this screen, and this is hard-coded. This is also a additional program, so this is BB keys, I think, Blackbox keys. This is of course not the most dynamically configured, and this is even a little bit too hardcore getting for me. Of course it works, but in general I didn't have the biggest problems with this, just that with this live streaming and stuff like this, I feel like this is slightly uncomfortable having this there. I would rather have this in the middle of the active screen or something like this. By the way, and again, the show is over, now we can just talk, I guess. And I have so many things I would want to do, and this is also why I know this vintage coding, which by the way we have still standing here, the 486 stuff from yesterday, which I might continue a little bit after a while here. And one thing that I was really considering that we could really do for the more top of the line, more state-of-the-art fun is, there is now with AMD on Linux and Mesa, there is no support for freezing, and actually I think I don't even have a freezing display, because my last display I purchased is the Dell 4K display on the other side, where my main disk is standing in the office. So I use this 23-inch 4K Dell Ultra Sharp something display, and this is not a paid advertisement, this is as usual just what we have chosen here. And this display also is already some 6 years old or something. I think that was at a time where freezing was relatively new. And this display, this Dell display, when I purchased this 4K display was, I think, €1,000, not that cheap. Now of course the prices are half. So for those of you who buy something now, you are lucky that stuff is 50% off. And this Dell display is slightly annoying because it was one of the first 4K displays, and it has this multi-stream, this MST that is always, so it has a left and a right logical display panel with MST multi-stream transport, and that is always a little bit of a hiccup to get working and configure and stuff like this. Even macOS sometimes crashes, so I need to be really careful waking up macOS, because it oftentimes can freeze and crash. Waking up from sleep with this display connected, slightly inconvenient, but just the regular peak bugs from Apple, because why should macOS work flawlessly? Of course it doesn't. And coming back to this, so I had already, since this 4K display, I had on my shopping list a new 4K non-MST freezing compatible display, because you know we love open standards. This is why we would go with freezing and not with NVIDIA G-Sync, because why should we buy into proprietary nonsense from NVIDIA, closed stuff that we can't develop for? So this is why we obviously take freezing. And now there are freezing drivers for Linux open source. I think this is scheduled for inclusion in, or already committed to, Linux, upcoming Linux 5. And with this freezing, I was thinking maybe I should write my own freezing window manager or compositor, because why not? If we continue to microkernel and stuff like this and operating systems, then already would have some window manager, although X and GL, but nonetheless proof of concept or in general. And with freezing this would be cool, because with freezing I know some X developers say it's not that easy or something, or not that useful, but what freezing is doing, so freezing is like G-Sync usually for games. It is it has a dynamic refresh normally, so this is right now refreshing with 60 Hz, and with freezing for games the refresh rate changes dynamically between maybe 40 and 140 or something, depending on the display. Some allow less. The first freezing displays only had 40 to 80 or something. The new high refresh rate have 40 Hz to 120, 140 Hz, depending on panel and display and stuff. And the reason for this is, if you're a game, you run through your first person shooter or whatever game, and the refresh rate varies, because one scene has more particles flying around than the other, and then one one area of your game your GPU can render with 50 Hertz, and you would get stuttering, and depending whether you run with VSync enabled, vertical ray tracing enabled or not, either you would get tearing or stuttering. And with this dynamic refresh rate, the graphic card could just refresh in this moment, when even if it's not 60 Hertz, but if it's 50 Hertz, then your display refreshes just a little bit slower. And this is what FreeSync and G-Sync are doing, basically the same. And also for those, as we have a news show today, the news from some weeks ago was that NVIDIA is now also supporting FreeSync on top of G-Sync, because initially NVIDIA wanted to cash in their $50 of licensing fees or royalties for G-Sync. And now they apparently, because G-Sync obviously is not the most successful, because who wants to buy into a proprietary ecosystem? So now NVIDIA, since the drivers from 2 weeks ago or something, supports FreeSync displays. And so coming back to the point, my point is, as I'm already considering doing more of this basic stuff and research and stuff, so the FreeSync aware variable refresh rate compositor, because this compositor would know what is updating with damage extension with the Xorg X11, the applications would already, or the X server would already report damages, that here something refreshed. And if you have no refreshes, so right now, okay, right now we have this video running with 60 Hertz, that is of course some refresh happening, but not considering here this refreshing higher refresh rate 60 Hertz video. Nonetheless, the rest here is currently not refreshing much. Here the statistics are only refreshing once a second. On this browser, probably, hopefully nothing is refreshing, except maybe some advertisement, GIF once a second or whatever. So you basically have a relatively static desktop. And in this scenario, you do not need to refresh with 60 Hertz. For example, to save power on laptops, you could right now go down with a refresh rate to 40 Hertz, and only if stuff updates, then refresh more often. And this is why I think this would be a nice thing. I think I read that some ex-developers said it's not that easy or not that useful, or not for full screen applications, but I think this could theoretically work. Of course, if you have an animated desktop where everything is blinking around, you scroll here. But by the way, theoretically, if we would have a high-performance browser, which currently this Firefox is a little bit not snappy, but okay, right now it's relatively okay, even though we are live streaming. There you also see that open source and Linux is getting amazing with all this. We have currently 2 hardware encodes running, one saving to disk, one streaming to YouTube. Yeah, 2 are running. So we have on this aging, not very high performance Mac Mini standing there behind the display now, because I had to make space on the desk. So an aging Core i7 quad-core Mac Mini is on Linux, even Mighty 2, not even some Fedora or something Ubuntu fancy. No, my old-fashioned, built from source, for embedded and server use, is running here this desktop with 2, not 1, but 2 hardware encoded streams. And still you can use your browser and stuff. Also general, I feel like Firefox could be more snappy, but especially what is strange, so the scrolling is actually quite fast, but loading a website sometimes is not. So this is a little bit, okay, this our site is quite static, but loading more dynamic stuff, this is a little bit, well, yes, we have a 400 Mbit line here, but for 400 Mbit, at least when I navigate the internet, I often feel like this could really a little bit more snappy, in my opinion, you see. But yeah, we currently have 2 hardware encode streams running. So, but even if I'm not streaming, this Firefox is not that snappy. So yeah, I wish it would be more snappy. And so this would be really interesting, this FreeSync based variable refresh rate compositor. Not sure if it's that it exists already in open source. I said it already, I read ex-developers say it's not that easy or not that useful, but I would find it interesting. Maybe we do it, but this is just the plenty ideas. I have plenty ideas I could do, just that I already spent so much time on open source. This is why we have this new YouTube streams and videos, to have here some more increased AdSense revenue for financing all this fancy and theoretical low-level development and research, because with all the T2 updates and Spark, MIPS, PowerPC, enablement, problems debugging, you have seen it. Even SSH did not come up on MIPS N64 or something. And everything takes time, so it's not like you compile it. You already spent multiple afternoons to compile your MIPS 64 or PowerPC or ARM, and then even SSH doesn't work, and then you spent another Sunday afternoon to debugging why SSH didn't work. For those who did not watch this stream, it was due to this seccomp not working due to some system call numbers whatsoever on MIPS. I have for now disabled this with seccomp sandbox in OpenSSH disabled. This SSHD works on MIPS on the Octane, but still need to theoretically debug why this did really not work and fix it. So more messages from the audience. Ash Thompson, yes, welcome. Happy sunny Sunday. Pretty sunny in Berlin, probably nice warm there on the balcony, I guess, but we sit here inside in live stream. Let's see, what did we got here? Would freezing G-Sync just be handled by the driver rather than needing specific support in X? Good question. This needs to be handled in the application and driver and even the windowing system, because the driver does not know what the graphic card wants to, what the application and X server wants to refresh. So as far as I've seen, I saw their APIs for managing this, because the X server or game, actually I think they usually wrote games, so this is probably more for full screen applications, because if you have 3 concurrent applications, you have there your web browser, you have the OpenOffice, and each is refreshing some buttons and highlights and stuff like this, then the driver does not know when the full screen page flip should occur. So you need some coordination, and this is why the X developers, there is also a new present extension. I don't really remember if it was handled by the present extension or by Xrender, but there was something. Maybe we can look this up in another live stream or video. And so what this basically does is coordinating the full screen page flip that is then not happening at a constant refresh interval, but dynamically. And this is mostly intended for games, obviously, or other full screen applications. This is why I was considering that a full screen GL or Vulkan accelerated compositor would be able to take advantage of this. So you would then, for example, if you have not much refresh happening, but you will always be surprised. I see it already coming. I have, like in my mind, I have the idea that this could work, and I see it already coming, that even if you do not see many refreshes, I have already the feeling that I will see more refreshes when you get actually the damage events from your clients, from your X server. I see already coming that there will be many more refreshes than I'm currently thinking about. Also, I said it already, I have right now, this is not the best example, because I have right now here on this dual monitor setup, I have here a high refresh, maybe 60 or at least 30, actually maybe 30 Hertz. I have here 30 Hertz video refresh running, and then here this VU meters here for the audio. So right now the X server and driver is of course bombarded with refreshes. But if you have a non-live stream setup, I would guess if you have your Firefox and OpenOffice running and stuff like this, you should not have so many refresh events. And again, not the very greatest advantage for desktop use, just that theoretically if you have a freezing compatible laptop panel, you could theoretically save some power, I guess, with this. And aside from this, you could theoretically, even for desktop, bump up the refresh rate, given that you have a really snappy browser that is able to sustain scrolling at 100 frames, then you would have better smooth scrolling theoretically. But maybe we need an improved browser for this, because right now the last weeks I'm a little bit disappointed with Firefox, not the most snappy. Let's see, yes, for games, what else do we have? Things we can actually see the sun today in the key. Yeah, here too. Also, otherwise Berlin is pretty cold in the winter, 0 degree Celsius or -10. But right now the last nights was 0 degree here, and in the sun it's nicely warm then. And yes, for games it would be much simpler, as the whole frame buffer is swapped at once rather than observing damage areas. Yeah, the thing is also, so my statistic stuff is also refreshing, I think, once a second. So, but this is, if this is coordinated, this is not so often. Of course, here this, do I even show this? Need to double check here. Yeah, you see this here. And so this is once a second, plus some scrolling and messages, and yeah. And the problem is that nowadays you see with my vintage coding, and this is why we have done the vintage coding the last weeks. The vintage coding is relatively simple, and this is why I wanted to get people learn from this already if they want to get into Java programming. And the more advanced the stuff gets nowadays with freezing and stuff, I see it already coming, that if you would want to do this low level bare metal with your own operating system, this will be for sure extremely complicated, hundreds of registers to be loaded. Really wonder about this. Maybe another month or year we could try to do this bare metal, but probably not today and to the next month. First I need a freezing display anyway, but this is my grief a little bit with the modern hardware, that somehow this register level programming is super complex. So it could be that just to enable some, well, just to enable HDMI or DisplayPort stuff like this, probably already 100 if not thousands of register writes that need to be all correct for the link training, because this modern differential multi-pair link stuff needs link training to train the link for the cable, because this transmit and receiver, they train the differential pairs there for stuff like over, was it in English, like interference and also lengths. The lengths might be some centimeters longer, some millimeters longer and shorter, and they do their link training for all this kind of electromagnetic interference and stuff like this. And this is also why sometimes when you have a stable DisplayPort and you move the cable, your DisplayPort connection corrupts and stuff like this, because these are rather high frequency connections that if they get out of sync, you obviously get some distorted picture there. So zero drop frames, amazing. And I designed, so what I brought a graphic card from an SGI Indie. I have no idea why yet. Yeah, have fun with it. I designed the library part for the connector for the Jitsu 230. You can still buy them, luckily length matching. Yeah, so that's it for my part, for most of it. Maybe leave in the comments below. It's of course always at the end of the stream we have more people in the audience, because it takes for people to get notifications and to join the live stream. We can, however, that the stream is not so long, I wanted to continue a little bit with this vintage coding here. As you see, we have still this 486 stuff standing here, and I last night continued a little bit with the Trident and Cyrus Logic bits for this Vesa local bus card. So very theoretically we could end this stream and start a new stream and do some more vintage tinkering, and hopefully don't try to destroy something today, as we have already 10 people left in the audience. And yeah, for those who watch this later on demand and in the archive, leave in the comments below if you think this weekly bits news show concept is worthwhile or not, if you learn something, what you like or dislike, what topics you like to see or not to see. Of course, I know everyone usually read news about the Samsung Galaxy S10, but nonetheless it was noteworthy, especially as it still has a headphone jack, which you know we like and love here very much. And I guess that's it for today. The stream is already with 1 hour plus a introduction long enough. Maybe I immediately continue with the second live stream and try to do some vintage coding. So stay tuned in this chat if you want to watch me do some more vintage tinkering. Yeah, Ash, and stay tuned. I just stop it and restart it. Let's see how this goes.